All right, so Quentin Johnston finished with 5 receptions, 51 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 6 targets in week 2 against the Panthers. Is he really a breakout candidate, or was his production maybe a little bit fluky? Well, we're going to take a look at his profile, his snap share and target share, take a look at some film and break down what we saw, assess his strengths and weaknesses and how he's best used as a player and how he's being used as a player, and then see what we can deduce from all these factors put together. All right, so Quentin Johnston, 6'3", 208 pounds. He was drafted 21st overall in the 2023 NFL Draft by the Chargers. When we look at his age, he's still only 23 years old, so there's still plenty of time for him to improve as a player. When we look at his metrics, his 4.57 40-yard dash is in the 43rd percentile, so that is below average. However, because he's running a 4.57 at 6'3", 208 pounds, it gives him a 98 speed score, which is in the 66th percentile. He is elite, though, in his burst score with his 135.9 score. That's in the 97th percentile. However, his agility score of 11.59 is only 15th percentile. And his catch radius of 10.25 is 89th percentile. All right, so what do these metrics tell you about him as a player? It tells you that he should be able to go up in the air and grab passes. And he's probably more of a straight line athlete because of his agility score being so low. We're going to break down what we see from him on film in just a minute, but keep that in mind. When we look at his production through 2 weeks, in terms of his snap share, in week 1 he had a 67% snap share against the Raiders, and in week 2 he had a 70% snap share against the Panthers. When we look at his targets, he had 5 in week 1 and 6 in week 2. In week 1 he had 3 receptions for 38 yards. They were mostly on drag routes, which were schemed up to allow him to get more yards after catch, which is one of his strengths, yards after catch. In week 2, he finished with 6 targets, 5 receptions, 51 yards, and 2 touchdowns. When we take a look at the receiving production from the Chargers in week 2, Quentin Johnston is the leader across the board here, which is pretty impressive. He had 2 more catches than the next best wide receiver. He had 12 more yards than the next best wide receiver. His yards per catch average was second highest on the team. However, his 2 touchdowns were the only 2 touchdowns they scored through the air. His long gain of 29 was also the longest, and he did finish with 6 targets, which was 2 more than any other player in this offense. When we take a look at snap shares for this team, he did lead the team with a 70% snap share. We saw 49% from Ladd McConkey, 43% from Josh Palmer, who did sustain an injury. Then they used the likes of Will Dissly, Hayden Hurst, and Eric Tomlinson. All of those guys are tight ends. And that leaves J.K. Dobbins, who is a running back. When we look at the target share, though, this is really nice if you're a QJ owner. He had a 31.58 target share in week 2. If he can sustain that, there's definitely a possibility that he is going to be a fantasy asset for us. I personally, before the season, was quite pessimistic about him. And it was a combination of a couple things. I'm a Ravens fan, right? And so I know exactly what a Greg Roman offense can do to your playmakers, specifically your wide receivers. Then that, with the combination of they begged him to perform last year when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were both injured, and he really didn't do much and had a bunch of focus drops. That led me to be a little bit down on him. But let's take a look at the film from week 2 and see whether he really looks good, how he's being utilized, and then assess his strengths and weaknesses and what we might be able to project from him going forward. In this first play, they are running a screen pass for QJ. They use a fake jet sweep motion to get the defense distracted and looking towards the right half of the field while trying to get blocking set up for QJ. The Panthers defense read this really well. He didn't really get anything, and so it really isn't his fault because the blocking just wasn't perfect and the defense was essentially perfect. But notice that they are using him at the line of scrimmage and trying to see if he can do something after the catch. All right, so here QJ is running a 9 route. He starts off with a split release to get off the line of scrimmage. He takes the outside on JC Horn here. Now, he is fast enough to outrun him, and then he dives inside at the end in order to get the touchdown over him. All right, so on this play, he's using a straight line to get open. On the previous play, he was being used in the short area of the field on a screen. Notice how, throughout at least these first two plays, there's not a lot of agility in it. It's really kind of a straight line type of thing for him, and then a short area of the field with the screen. However, to his credit, he absolutely wins here, and it's a really nice play on the ball at the end. And so I really like what I saw from him on this play, and when you use him correctly, he can do things like this. It's just when you want to use him on precision routes that he really doesn't have what it takes in terms of the agility and the being refined in his route running to take advantage of said routes. All right, so if you like what you're seeing so far, please feel free to like and subscribe. It lets me know that you want to see more content like this in the future. I plan on breaking down a lot of film from various NFL players when they have a big day, a breakout game, or even if they're in a slump, to try to figure out beyond just the raw stats what we're really seeing from them on the field. Once again, feel free to like and subscribe. It lets me know that you want to see more content like this. All right, so here the Chargers are at the 5-yard line. QJ is running sort of a drag crossing route, something in between there. Now, he finds himself wide open because there's just nobody around. It's a busted coverage by the Panthers. And so it's not as though he mossed a cornerback or broke somebody's ankles with some filthy route running, but to his credit, he found an opening and he caught the ball. He did what he was asked to do on the play. Really, there isn't too much to glean here, but take note that, for instance, this was a busted coverage touchdown, so while yes, he caught the touchdown, it's not as if he did anything special in particular, but credit to him for holding on to the ball and finding a hole in the zone. All right, so here we have a miss on a 9 route from Herbert to QJ. QJ uses the same split release that he used on the 9 route earlier. However, this time he's pretty much locked up. And so what comes to mind here is that he really just doesn't possess speed that is that great. His 4.57 40-yard dash is indicative of that. His build-up speed is decent, but he's kind of hit or miss because of that on routes such as 9 routes, because faster, more physical cornerbacks are going to be able to contend with him, but it's not as if he's incapable of running these straight line routes. All right, here the Chargers are running another screen for QJ. Now, there's one blocker to 3 defenders, so there's really not much for him to do. It's not an advantageous situation. And so he does maximize all the yardage that he possibly can out of this poor situation. But let's conceptualize what in these 5 plays we've seen. We've seen 2 screen routes, we've seen 2 9 routes, and then we've seen 1 drag route crosser, something along those lines. And so what we're seeing is that he's being used at the line of scrimmage and essentially in a straight line. There isn't a lot of advanced route running here. There isn't really any mossing of people here. But to the Chargers' credit, they're using him to his strengths, allowing him to just get the ball in his hands and go, and then run in a straight line because he really isn't the most agile athlete. And so while he does have his limitations, the Chargers are using him to his strengths. All right, so what can we conclude after looking at his profile, his metrics, his snap share and target share, and then breaking down what we saw from him on film and what are his strengths and weaknesses? Well, when we look at his profile, he's a tall receiver who has a decent build, being 208 pounds, and he's still really young at 23 years old. And so he has the physical attributes to be a dominant number 1 wide receiver, being 6'3", 208 pounds. Now, as far as his metrics go, he is not very fast. He does have a decent amount of straight line build-up speed, and he has a great vertical and broad jump, so he should theoretically be able to sky up above defenders and snag balls and moss people. However, he plays really small, does suffer from concentration drops, which To be fair, I didn't see any in this game, so there is a decent chance that he's improved upon his issues from this past season. And he's really not an agile athlete at all. And so he's best used in a straight line, or if you just get the ball in his hands and let him read the blocking. And so he does have his limitations in that he's not going to route you up. You're going to ask him to do the easy things. But to his credit, he is succeeding, at least he did this past week against the Panthers. He's succeeding in what they ask him to do. And so what can we deduce here? Well, he did have the highest snap share of any one of the receivers, and tight ends too. He also had by far the highest target share. He was efficient with his targets in that he caught 5 of 6 of them. And even though, for instance, on the one touchdown, it was a busted coverage, there was nobody around, and he didn't really do anything to get open per se. To his credit, he was open, he was targeted, and he caught the ball. What do you want him to do? If he didn't catch the ball, then he would be being criticized for it. And then on the 9 route, to his credit, he had a step on the defender, and he cut to the inside at the last second and snagged the ball. He did his job. It wasn't the most separation in the world, but he won his route. Overall, I think that if the Chargers can keep using him to his strengths and giving him enough volume, there is an opportunity for him to be a consistent fantasy player for us. But we have to understand that he is going to have limitations. When you are a below average athlete in terms of your agility, and really when you lack the nuance route running that some of these elite wide receivers possess, it's really going to limit your ceiling. But when you're used correctly and with a coaching staff that uses you to your strengths, it does help you maximize your output. Now, because he plays really small, he doesn't really moss people, and he does have his limitations due to his lack of agility, I don't think he's really ever going to be a dominant number 1 wide receiver. But if the Chargers continue to use him to his strengths, he can be a decent fantasy play for us. Now, the worry I have, if you're a QJ owner, I personally don't have any shares, but if you are a QJ owner, the only thing I worry about is that Ladd McConkey really starts to turn it on and starts turning into a target hog. The good news is, out of all the wide receivers they have, QJ is their best bet to be an X wide receiver. Ladd McConkey is better used as a flanker or a slot, and so they can both be on the field at the same time, even if Ladd McConkey is the more targeted wide receiver when the season progresses. And so where I'm going with that is he's probably quite likely to keep his role as the X wide receiver, but you do have to worry that he's not going to be receiving a 30% target share over the course of his career, because Ladd McConkey looks really, really good. And so the other thing that concerns me is this really is a limited offense in the sense of passing volume. And so while he had over 30% target share, that was still 6 targets. It's not like his 30% target share was 10 to 12 targets. And so I worry that his target share isn't going to remain that high, and Ladd McConkey is going to eat into that. And so personally, I would try to sell him if he can string together a couple of decent performances, because I really don't think that he's ever going to live up to being a first-round wide receiver due to his limitations. And in fantasy, I think that the passing volume isn't going to be that great. I think Ladd McConkey is going to really step up and earn a lot of targets. But it's really going to come down to whether you agree with my assessment or if you really think that he can take the next step up. All I'm saying is, while he does have strengths and the Chargers are using him to his strengths, which is good, there are several factors that you do need to be concerned about regarding Quentin Johnston. But what do you think? Do you agree with my assessment? Disagree with my assessment? Please let me know below in the comments section and let me know why. With that being said, if you want to see more videos like these, please like and subscribe. It lets me know that you want to see more content like this. Thank you and have a good day.